Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today delving back into a topic which we've covered previously on the channel but not for quite some time, and that is Canadian Combat Uniform. Now I really like Canadian Combat Uniform. It has various eccentricities to the design and I like it from that point of view. I have recently been going through the collection and I think over the next year or so I'm going to look to expand the collection, fill in some gaps and so forth in terms of bits and pieces I'm missing. I have quite a bit of 60s kit and not a huge amount from the 70s and 80s, so I'd like to fill in some gaps. But in the collection I have two tan or khaki examples of the Mark II lightweight combat coat, which we have on the mannequin here. This is the Type A example. I also have an example of the Type D. There were 4 versions of this, and these are a relatively late development of the Canadian Combat Uniform, or an immediate post-Cold War development of the Canadian Combat Uniform. So from my point of view, this is sort of the end of my period of collecting, is the early 1990s, and these fit nicely into that sort of time bracket. There were 4 different designs, as I say, A, B, C and D, and this is a Type A. The colour varied between them, and they were issued on a fairly large-scale trial basis. They were used in Somalia, and the reason for the development of this uniform is Canada's increasing involvement in desert or arid environments on UN peacekeeping missions, and that was it was seen as necessary to introduce some form of desert uniform. Because of that, obviously the standard Canadian combat uniform was produced in a plain green or drab colour. So a tan version of that uniform was seen as being suitable for use in more arid environments, and this is one example of that. So as we normally do, we're going to have a look at the various details of this. We'll take a look at the labelling as well. I do have a Type D example as well. As I say, I'd really like to fill in the gaps of B and C and maybe talk about all 4 together at some point going forward, because the main difference between them is the colour, and obviously that will be best illustrated showing them side by side and comparing the different colours. There were also trousers made to go with this as well. I don't have examples of those. I do see them occasionally, but they always seem to be in very large sizes or very small sizes, presumably the ones which survived and weren't issued. Whereas this example of the coat is in a good size and fits me quite well. And I always prefer to get things which are sort of in my size. Not that I plan to wear this, but as I say, it's just nice to have something which does fit. And obviously they fit better on the mannequin if they're close to my size as well. So we'll start talking about the various details we have here. The basic design, as I say, is taken from the Mark II lightweight combat coat, and that had introduced various features, notably the draw cord at the waist and so forth, compared to the 60s versions of the combat uniform. So there were incremental developments in the actual design of the garment itself. As I say, the main thing we have here is the change of the colour to this sort of stone, slightly grey khaki colour as we have here. It closes down the front with a row of buttons there, as you can see, and these are the Canadian slotted buttons with a loop of cloth holding them in place, and you have larger versions of those closing the pockets. The 2 breast pockets here are shaped to take a single 20-round magazine for the C1, of course. If we open this up here, you can see, oh, Block 24, hadn't noticed that previously. I presume that's from when this was for sale on eBay. But you can see underneath here, or inside the pocket rather, the nylon lining there to strengthen that. And this is still in the green colour, and this is very close to the actual colour of the regular issue Canadian combat uniform. So you can see, not ideal for use in arid environments, and this khaki colour is a lot more fitting for that sort of environment. So those 2 pockets are both strengthened with the nylon inside, and as I say, originally at least intended to take 20-round magazines for the rifle. Of course, the 1964 pattern equipment, which was introduced alongside the Canadian combat uniform, didn't have any ammunition pouches in it. The idea originally had been that the combat coat, both the heavyweight and the lightweight versions, would be used to carry magazines in the pockets. That carries across to the lower pockets as well. You can see here, these are large lower bellows pockets, 1 on each side, with a large flap there. Open this up, the single button. And again, these are on a loop of cloth so you can get your finger behind them, and they're easy to manipulate when you're wearing gloves from that point of view. Just makes them easier to hook through the buttonhole like that. But each of these lower pockets also has nylon loops inside them, and you can fit 2 magazines in there, 1 in each of these compartments in the lower pocket. And then obviously, in addition to the magazines, you've got the bag of the pocket to carry other bits and pieces in there if required. And the other pocket round on the other side is exactly the same in that regard. You have 2 loops for rifle magazines in there as well. The draw cord at the waist here, you can see, runs through a channel and then comes out to the front through these eyelets here, which are painted white, interestingly. I'm not sure why white was chosen as the colour, but you can just knot that together obviously and draw that in and then tuck the ends away. Thank you for the advice previously on that. Those who, I can't remember the chap's name, but a chap who'd served in the Canadian military advised on how these were tucked away to keep them neat, so thank you for that. But just left those loose there just to show you the draw cord at the waist there. And then of course we have one at the lower edge here as well. This end, it just passes out of the end of the draw cord, and then here it passes through an eyelet there, obviously to allow for the fact that the front doubles over itself there, as you can see. We'll start moving this round now and have a look at some of the other details. Moving this round to look at the right hand side, if we turn the collar up here, you can see we do have another button under here, so this can be buttoned right up to the collar if required. On the shoulder we have an epaulette, and you can see we have another Canadian slotted buttons there, securing that up on the shoulder. Obviously rank slides, slides with the title, shoulder titles on could be worn on these as with the regular green Canadian combat uniform. And then on the arm here you can see we do have elbow reinforcement in this instance, and you can see we have a single button closure to the cuff there, and that just opens up, no gusset or anything there, which would be typical of a lightweight design. Obviously nice and wide, it allows these to be rolled up if required. And again, all of the smaller buttons are also held in place with a loop of cloth, and you can get your finger behind them there to just make it that bit easier to manipulate them and fasten up the buttons. So that's the right hand side there. We'll have a look at the back now. Looking at the back here, not a huge amount more to see, but we do have stitching here across the shoulders where the yoke is attached across the back there. You can see the channel for the draw cord coming around here, and you have darts here and here pulling the waist in there. So this does give something of a tailored fit to this. It does nip the waist in, as you can see. As I say, otherwise fairly plain. We won't look at the left hand side, it's a mirror image of the right, there are no further details to look at there. We'll turn this inside out now, have a look at the interior details and have a look at the labels as well. Looking at the interior of the front of the coat here, you can see various details of the construction. You can see how the arms attach on here, you can see the stitching for the pockets here, the double layer of cloth down each side here, which is doubled back on itself to give that extra thickness where the buttons attach and where the buttonholes are worked through, as you can see there. There is an internal breast pocket. If we fold this back here, there's a section of touch and close or Velcro here. If we open that up, you can see we have a fairly small internal breast pocket there. You see that in there. Just closes with a section of khaki touch and close or Velcro there, as you can see. You can see the channel for the draw cord coming around the waist here, the stitching where the nylon loops attach into the lower pockets to hold magazines. I say that's the original intention of the design. And then you can see the label down in the bottom front here. We'll have a look at this now in close-up. So the manufacturer is Confection Frontenac Incorporated, and the designation of this is Coat Combat Lightweight, and then you have a code there, and then type A, which is the type of this particular tan uniform. As I say, these were made in type A, B, C and D, and you have 7038 and then size 7038 repeated, and then that equates to regular small, basically my size, and then you have the NATO size of 7080 to 8595, and then the date there of August 1991. Moving on to look at the right hand side here, we can see various other details of the construction. We can see the seam coming around there where the sleeve attaches onto the shoulder, and if I lift this up you can see that there, and then the seam running down the side there as well, the draw cord channel coming around there, and again the rows of stitching where the loops attach in to the lower pockets, as you can see there. The cuff is obviously very simple, as already said, but you do have a double layer of cloth there. Obviously the cuff is a point of wear, and also you want that double layer of cloth for attaching the button and for manufacturing the buttonhole in there. You can also see the stitching here where the elbow reinforcement is attached. You can see that there. Looking at the back here, you can see the row of stitching across the shoulders here where the yoke attaches. You can see the channel for the draw cord coming around at the waist here, and the darts where the waist is taken in, brought in, drawn in. And then down here we have the instruction label, and we'll have a look at this in close-up as well now. And you can see this gives the full designation of Coat Combat Lightweight Mark II, and then you have that repeated in French, of course, and then you have the instructions beneath that. And interestingly, there is an error on the label here on the French side to the right side, where it appears that number 6 has been printed in place of the number 2, and it's actually been scribbled out and written over. The number 2 has been added in with pen, it would appear. But you can see the instructions here, and obviously pause should you wish to read this label in full. So hopefully you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, it is my intention to fill in the gaps in the uniform, not only this tan version of the uniform, various forms in which it was produced, but also some of the gaps which I have in the sort of later Cold War era of Canadian combat uniform. And the idea of that, of course, is to be able to produce videos talking more about the development of the Canadian combat uniform, both the lightweight and the GS or heavyweight versions of it, and cover that in a bit more detail. And there is also the hope at some point in the future to get to some events and maybe recreate the kit of the Canadian soldier of the latter Cold War period, perhaps do a table display, soldiers from different periods, show the 1982 and the 1964 pattern equipment side by side and so forth. So that's the idea of building up the Canadian collection, is I'd like to cover it at events at some point in the future. And I'm always very appreciative of the advice people have provided, those who served at the time in the latter period of the Cold War, regarding the kit and how it was worn, how it was used and so forth. That of course feeds into the idea of producing these displays going forward. As I say, hopefully this topic will be covered in even more detail. We'll have a look at the different types going forward once I have a more complete picture. That would be nice to do. And obviously talking about the trousers and so forth as well. And as I say, that's certainly my aspiration going forward, is to talk about this in more detail. If you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, particularly those videos going forward talking about more Canadian kit, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And of course, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel. As I always say, it really is greatly appreciated. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.